We have already pledged our allegiances, so we'll move on to item C. Friends, you have a motion, you have an agenda in front of you prepared by our city clerk. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? This will be a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That passed unanimously. Mr. Bill Root, a downtown business person, welcome to your last city council meeting. But hey, you got two in tonight, so that's working in your favor right there.
Okay.
Welcome back. We'll call on you at the end of the meeting if you have any comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now is the time for public comments for any items which are not on the agenda. If anyone would like to address the city council on something that's not on the agenda, please rise to the microphone now. I see no one rising, so we'll move on to E, the consent calendar. This would be for setting the April 7th, 2025, 7 p.m. in the council chambers as the time and place for another public hearing on the budget. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Second.
And any discussion?
Do we have to do this as a separate item, or can we just do it as part of the consent calendar? There's only one thing. Usually we have to do that as a roll call vote as a separate item. Not necessary this time?
My notes say it's going to be a voice vote.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right.
Make sure we're doing it right.
I hear no discussion, so all those in favor of item E1, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? That passed unanimously. We'll have a budget hearing on the 7th at 7. That brings us to item F, a study session. We are having our friends from, let's get the name right, the Iowa Northland Regional Council of Governments, known as INRCOG. And come on up, sir, and give us a presentation on housing.
Good evening. I'm Brian Schoen with the INRCOG office, and Mayor had asked that a representative from our office come up and kind of walk you through. We know you did a housing study and just kind of want to walk through some pieces of that study and then talk maybe a little bit about a project that has kind of risen and fallen a little bit, and so just really want to update you with regard to some of the things in that study. First and foremost, should or would hope that you've had an opportunity to go through that report. Very extensive, 170 pages plus long, lots of economics, lots of data, lots of numbers, and so certainly very interesting, very well done, very well put together document. And so tonight I'm just going to kind of walk back through some of the pieces of that document and then maybe try and relate those then potentially to a project or projects that you may be thinking about, or some local endeavors that the city may be wishing to do in order to help spur housing a little bit. So what we'll do is, I sent some notes along. Hopefully you have those notes, and I'll kind of talk through those notes just a little bit, if that's okay with everybody. So let's just kind of work through the document a little bit. I start from the back and work to the front a lot of times, and so I don't read the executive summary. I'll go right back to the recommendations, and then I'll go back to the data. But if you go back to the recommendations at the back of the document, you're going to see about 3 areas that they're talking about housing. They're talking about general occupancy, for sale housing, rental housing, and senior housing were kind of the 3 focus areas from the city's perspective and your consultant's perspective that the city focused its efforts on. So very broad categories, not a lot of detail with those, but again, lots and lots of statistics to help support really the conclusions that they've come up with. In particular, they've identified a number of challenges then as well. So if you're scrolling back through the document, then I'm just at the next section after the recommendations, and they had come up with about 13 different challenges and opportunities. In my notes, if you picked up on the different colored font, there's a clue to the font. The ones that are red are ones that I think you could probably deal with at a local level. If they're black, then they may be something that maybe is a little bit beyond our reach here from the city of Waverly's perspective. So from housing's look-see, you'll see that obviously affordability and aging population were a couple of things that they brought up as challenges. Those challenges exist in our entire region and in fact probably entire state, if not in the entire Midwest. So I serve a 6-county area, Chickasaw above you to the north, and then Bramer and Butler, Grundy, Blackhawk, Buchanan. And so this is really nothing that's a revelation really in any of our counties. Certainly an aging population is something that has come up. I started work in 1991 at Intercog, and it was something that was coming up in the census in 1990 already. So 3 or 4 censuses ago, that this has been a challenge for us. And Iowa has always been in the top 5 in the United States with regard to having population over the age of 65. And so again, the challenge, again, back to housing, is that a lot of our housing is aging dramatically as well too. So if you look through that report, you'll see that the lion's share of housing stock in most of our communities was built in 1950 or newer, again, pretty aged, and you'll see a significant number of units that were built in 1939 or newer. And so lots and lots of age going on with the housing stock too, so not just population. Waverly, here's a unique, I think, piece in this study that I jumped on or that I saw was that the commuters issue was really something that struck me. I did not realize, I've done a lot of planning work in the community, in and out of the community for, matter of fact, my 30-some years. One of my first projects was a community builder plan here in town. So this struck me right away was how many commuters you have and what share our jobs are filled by commuters in town. So you've got a lot of in-migration of workers, if you will, that are coming in to work in the community, which really is something that's unique for Waverly. Again, they talked through some of the side effects or the continuing effects of COVID-19, as well as some household growth and mobility. Infill development, that's really just what it says. It's just working through identifying vacant lots and then attempting to use those lots to fill. Typically, it's cheaper to put housing in there because they're serviced. Streets, water, sewer, all those kinds of things exist, and so sometimes it's a little quicker to work through that route in terms of building more houses. Mortgage rates, those kinds of things, those are going to be a stretch for us to deal with, but certainly residential lot supply. Zoning and land use regulations, I'm just kind of hopping down through the list. This is something that we've had conversations with other communities about as well. Those zoning regulations, albeit governed by the state of Iowa and in some cases the United States, for the most part, those are locally drafted laws. And how you interpret, how you write those, there's a lot of latitude at the local level to do that. Less so with building codes, but with zoning and subdivision regulations, you've got some opportunities there to look at some things if you so wish. And then looking at some innovation things. Certainly you've all heard about the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, the tiny homes, all those kinds of things. Those are all mentioned in this report, and they've been identified as some opportunities perhaps for the city. Again, this falls back to the city really to look at some of these tools, pick out the ones you think work best for your community, and then try and piece and part them together into hopefully some projects. Some will require policy, some may require dollars. Again, everything is going to come back through the council. So some of the programs, as you come through the report that they're looking at, obviously, they get into, well, how do we make these programs work? And they've identified a number of state agencies. They've identified then some programs for you. And certainly we don't want to overlook Iowa Finance Authority and Iowa Economic Development Authority. Those two funding sources have been stalwarts for a lot of our housing programs that we've worked with in the region and still work with. We work with Iowa Finance Authority on 3 housing trust funds, and so certainly they would be one that we should leave near the top of the list from a state agency's perspective. And those dollars that we're working with at the trust fund are strictly state dollars. So they don't come necessarily with the federal encumbrances that come with those federal dollars at times. And so sometimes they're a little bit easier to work with to make your projects happen a little quicker and a few less requirements that we have to get over the hurdle on. So certainly would encourage you to take a look at some of those programs they've identified. But where I want to spend my time is really talking through some of the other, because that other is 27 items long. And so as you look through those, again, I'm using that kind of the same key code where I've identified things red. I think those are some things that perhaps the city could look at if it so wishes. And then black might be a little bit more stretched out in terms of your ability to impact or influence. Accessory dwelling units, I had mentioned those before. Density bonuses, fast track permitting. We've got communities that are looking at both of these things. So density bonus, just what it says, allowing higher density housing in certain areas of the community. In some communities outside the state of Iowa, they will allow you to trade development rights, purchase development rights, and make those densities as high as can be negotiated. The fast track permitting is something that communities are really trying to work through. How long does it take me if I walk in the door with a set of plans for a new house or a new duplex? How long does it take me to get through the permitting process? Who looks at them? How long do they take? How long does it take me to get the actual permit in my hands? And if anybody's walked through that process or just thought through. Some of these that are in this report are a little bit of a self-examination as well too. So it gives you an opportunity to step back and think about, well, how long does it take in order to get through the permitting process if I walk in the door with a set of plans? Am I done in a day? Am I done in a week? Is it 3 weeks? You know, how long does it take me to get through my permitting process? First-time home buyers, just what it says. We've got one of these that we're working through in a community right now. They are setting up a first-time home buyers, just what it says. It helps buy down really those closing costs for the first-time home buyer. We've got some communities that are looking at expanding it and taking away the first time and just saying down payment assistance. And so they're looking at certain income categories, they're looking at certain areas of the community, they're trying to incent things and make it happen in certain parts of the town. So certainly a couple of options for you there as well. Historic preservation, I don't need to talk with you about that, you certainly know all about that. Any trade partnerships that may be out there with schools, any opportunities you may have with schools with regard to building units or just training, learning, apprenticing, those kinds of things. And then there are a number of items that, as you work through the list, that jump out at you, and they're really more marketing kinds of things as I look at the list. So for me, 27 items is a lot to deal with in one bite, right? So for me, I start grouping them together into categories. This one's marketing, this one's regulatory, this one's actually construction, and try to put them together in pieces that hopefully I can digest a little bit easier. Again, home energy loans, that might be something that's done in conjunction with Waverly Light and Power or utilities. And so certainly you can start to see some of the partners that perhaps might be involved in the process or at least the discussion moving forward. Infill lots, we talked about that, land acquisition, living where you work. You know, again, back to that commuting conversation about the commuters that are commuting in, but also those that are going out as well too. So again, just knowing that there are some things that perhaps that aren't overly complicated. They don't require, you know, that you go through and figure out an algorithm or anything like that. Some of these things are really small, but really could be big in the end. And we'll get to a couple of those here in a little bit. Certainly talking about or talking to realtors, talking to developers, rent-to-own program. I had indicated the Community Action Corp used to have a program that they did rent-to-own. We helped with our housing trust fund, we put dollars into a couple of homes in communities in Fredericksburg and in Sumner. And so they had done rent-to-own Tripola as well too. It was an opportunity for a household to get into a unit that was renovated, and then over the course of 5 years, they worked from being a tenant to ownership. And so it gave them an idea of what's the utility bill look like? What do the property taxes look like? Can I make this go? And so they got a chance really to take an internship at being a homeowner. And so kind of a neat program. I'm not sure they still do that program, but they did it for a lot of years. It would be something that certainly we could ask. Tax abatement, TIF, those tools are out there as well too. Don't know if you use tax abatement, rebating taxes for housing units. If you use TIF for housing, some communities do not. There's nothing wrong with that, but just know that some communities are using tax increment finance for housing projects. The thing that is, I think, a positive with using TIF for housing, one negative is it's only got a 10-year sunset on it in terms of a tool. But one positive that I see is that while it may be difficult to build market housing, what it requires is as you expend dollars, tax increment dollars, that you set aside dollars equaling the percentage of low and moderate income property owners in the county. And so if in Braemar County, the low and moderate income percentage is 40%, that means with a TIF project, you may be setting aside 40% of the TIF dollars in addition to what you're giving a developer or you're rebating in an account. And you're saying, well, what would those dollars be used for? Well, some communities have created smaller programs, rehab, repair, down payment assistance. They're using those dollars. It's income driven. You still have to qualify. The state still requires that you qualify, but it creates a fund. It's not a fund that you have to, it's not something you pull out of your general fund. It's a fund that's generated by TIF and is over here and can be used for projects if you so wish. And those are done strictly at a local level. They're not going into the state. They're being reviewed by local attorney and then move forward. And if you wish to share it with bond counsel, you're willing to do that as well too. But for the most part, if you expend the dollars on low and moderate income projects, you're fine. And we're doing that in probably 4 or 5 different cities right now. They've had TIF for housing purposes for a long time. Some have accumulated a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in those accounts. And so those dollars aren't working for them. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and so why did we collect them in the first place is the question that gets asked. And so what they're doing is creating programs where they put those monies back out into the community. And so relatively simple administrative plan that we've put together for them. Again, waiving development fees. Okay, so after you figured out how long does it take me to get through your permitting process, what does it cost me for that new house? What does the building permit fee look like for me? Is it $100? Is it $1,500? It probably depends on the size of the house and the value of the house that I build. But that coming back to me might be something that is helpful to me. And so not just necessarily taxes being abated, but things like a refund of the building permit fees that come back to me. And that could include the hookups, it could include the expenses that are associated with utilities as well too. So you've got a couple of communities around you that do that as well. They actually rebate then their building permit fees back. Again, they're trying to just find a little niche so that they can then incent housing one way, shape, or form. Doesn't necessarily have to be great big, but some of these things when you put them together work pretty well. The list that I put together for you, I had visibility. The word is actually visitability. And so in your report, what it was looking at accessibility of units for persons with physical disabilities and being able to access housing in the community. So certainly something that perhaps is of interest as well. Homes for Iowa then is a program that's out there. Don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at that at all. If you haven't, I would certainly encourage you to take a look at it, just homesforiowa.com. I think it's .com, I don't think it's .org, but just type in Homes for Iowa and you'll come up with it. And what it is modular homes that are being constructed on site near the Newton incarceration facility. And those are low-risk inmates, and they have an opportunity to learn a skill underneath an apprentice, whether it's an electrician, a plumber, master construction. And so there's classroom time, but it also gives them hands-on. And they're building units. And those units then are disseminating out into the state of Iowa. They've just crossed their 100th home, 5 years, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, when they started with basically a pasture. And so now they're putting out homes. They've got different home designs. On the website, you can actually walk through like a realtor's website through the unit. And the units come to you without flooring, and they come without appliances. So for the most part, the unit's done. Obviously, you need a basement, or you need a foundation, you need a driveway, perhaps a garage, those kinds of things. But where can you buy a brand-new unit that's 3 bedrooms and 2 baths for about $90,000? Okay, so there's an opportunity there as well. Certainly would encourage you to take a look at that. Again, those are the kinds of things that we looked at when we were making this list for you. So really, for me, some of the things that I would talk to you about is really starting to prioritize those study findings. Tear the study apart. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, pull it apart and start looking at it. Start grouping things together and saying, no, this is absurd, this is not going to work, or this is a great idea, or can we do that? What can we do? What can't we do? And it's really just going from there in terms of prioritization. The question I would have for you, the overarching question I would have for you is, what's your role? You the developer, you the overseer, you the financier, what is your role? I don't expect an answer. It's just my question for you, somewhat rhetorical, is what do you see your role as? In some communities, they don't think economic development or that housing is economic development. I get that. And in some communities, they do. And so in some cases, the council really take a step back when it comes to housing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's their choice. But it's something that you really need to kind of get into is, okay, what is our role as city council? How much do we want to drive this? Or do we want to step back and let it kind of occur? We'll oversee it. We'll make sure it's planned. We'll service it. What's your role? But one thing I would tell you, and that's the same thing that we had told a couple of our other communities who have been very fortunate that housing development has come to them for lots and lots of years. And so now things are changing because a lot of other communities are catching up. They're using these little incentives, they're doing this, they're doing that. Pitching quality of life, they're starting to eat into that easiness that housing then comes to communities. And so they're realizing they're going to have to compete a little bit. And they're going to have to probably come up with some other tools, some other ideas so that the housing continues to come to the community. And so, again, my question for you is, what is your role? Are you going to lead? Are you going to let somebody else do that for you? Who needs to be involved? Is there a task force that's part of an economic development commission? Is there a housing group that's built out of our housing subcommittee built out of the city council? Does that include planning commission? Does that include board of adjustment? Does it include building? Does it include Waverly Light and Power? Does it include administration because there's finance? And so it's a matter of really who's being put together in order to work through some of these problems and some of these issues. Because really right now what you have is a lot of questions, right? And so as I go through the report and I think, oh, this is a really well put together report and there's a lot of things, but if I were sitting in your shoes, I really have to eat the elephant a bite at a time, right? I just need to take pieces of it a little bit at a time. I need to group it together. I need to look at each one and say, yeah, this is great, or this is kind of absurd, or this needs to work with this, so I need to really have both tools in place. And then really who needs to be sitting here in the conversation. A lot of the conversation that we have with communities before we get to the council and the mayor's level is really just sitting around the table and walking through the ideas. You've got a great study, you've got a great place to start. Again, then outside involvement in this whole discussion. You know, developers, builders, bankers, EDC members, business industry, schools, Wartburg. One of the things that we did in a recent housing needs assessment that was really interesting and would be really interesting to do in Waverly, maybe they did this, but would be to reach out to those individuals that are commuting, that are coming into town to work, and I would want to know where they're driving from. And so what we did in one community was we reached out to HR and some of the bigger businesses and bigger industries and bigger employers and just said, we know you're not going to divulge that. We're not asking that. We just want to know the town's name and the address on the check that they get or the stub they get. We want to know how far they're driving to work in this particular community. I think you'd be amazed how far some people drive in order to go to work. It's not unusual for an hour or even an hour and a half. So it would be really interesting to see how far these commuters are coming. Again, living where you work. So really, for me, it would be a matter of trying to identify a group of folks who really need to tear this thing apart and really go through it and really look at, okay, these things are good, these things maybe not so much. How do we make it work for us? You probably spent a lot of time and a lot of money on that study. Let's make sure that you use it. So that's kind of my view on the report. Looking at the one potential project that really is a larger project, and again, a couple of things about the project. Again, you're going to see some of the repeat of the comments that I've already made, but thinking about that Washington Irving, that elementary school property a little bit.
Yeah, let me just, for historical
Yeah,
reference.
please.
Sorry for interrupting. Washington Irving Elementary School used to sit on property that's now behind where Domino's, behind where the Subway used to be, across from where Quick Trip used to be.
Behind High Point Land, is that the company that's in that?
Yeah,
mall?
yes. Yeah,
Gotcha.
thank
So
you.
For people who want to reference what's currently there, not what
Yeah,
used to be there.
yeah, thanks. And that school was destroyed in the 2008 flood.
Okay.
And then subsequent flood mitigation makes that land potentially usable. And that land is owned by the city of Waverly,
Okay,
which makes it a low-hanging fruit, frankly.
okay. All right. I was around during those '08 floods. Our office worked with your office on a lot of the residential buyouts. And then we did some of the business incentives that were downtown. There were incentives given to owners of commercial properties downtown so that they would hopefully hang with us in terms of business. And so I remember a lot of that. And unfortunately, our COG and lots of COGs have gotten pretty good at disaster stuff. So I remember '93, and I've got 2016, 2017, and so 2008 is probably the high water mark, no pun intended, in terms of the size of the disaster. So I remember that school being there. I remember seeing it. One of the projects, or two of the projects we worked on with the school district were the safe rooms in the two schools. So the auditorium and then the front of the high school on the north side, those are FEMA safe rooms, and we worked with the city or the community school district's board of directors and their then superintendent to do that. We're not involved very much in any of the school building or the FEMA work that would have involved the buildings. So forgive me if I ask questions that maybe seem obvious to you, but maybe not obvious to me. And so the real question, the first question I have, which is really the overarching question, is how was it cleared? How was it funded? Were FEMA funds used there? And what I'm getting at was, is there a deed restriction hanging over that property? Because I know when we buy residential properties with FEMA dollars, hazard mitigation dollars, most notably, they come with a little covenant on the back end that is very restrictive. And what it does is it takes away a lot of the reuse of the property. I'm not saying I like it, I'm just saying I'm asking if it's there, if anybody's done any title opinion, background search, if there's anything in your research, your paperwork, when you acquired that from the school district, or if the school district has paperwork on that, or if there's anything recorded in the way of a deed restriction that might potentially get in our way. That's really kind of my gatekeeper question, because if it's there, then we got a big hurdle to get over and around and through. If it's not there, we still have to talk about the conversation of, well, it flooded once. And so we want to make sure that we know if that deed restriction is still there, because that's serious business and it's permanent, and they do come out and check, believe it or not. So I just had 4 cities, 3 from 2016 and 1 from 2008, that got letters that said, here's a list of the following properties that we helped you buy out. Please verify that they're still being used in the manner that is attributed to the deed restriction. And so the cities had to attest, and my advice is I'd go out and take photographs if I were you as well. Very easy with the phone today. Go out there and take some photos just to make sure that you've got something in the file that you went out and looked at in case somebody asks. But they do come out and look, and so that deed restriction is something that certainly I would want to make sure is not there. If it's there, again, we've got a bigger hurdle to get over. Because what it does, the ones that are residential, and you guys probably know this, I'm probably not telling you anything new, is that what it will allow basically is open space, vacant, and it will allow an open-sided shelter. and maybe restrooms, and I think that's about it. It will allow you then to deed it to another entity that would use it in the same manner, like a county conservation board or something like that. Very restrictive deed restrictions that come along with buyouts. So their money does come with caveats on the back end. So for me, that's my first starting point, because I don't want you to get running down the road too far on that conversation and get tripped by it and having spent a bunch of money with, a surveyor or an engineer, those kinds of things, those kinds of professionals that you're probably going to need at some point in time. So for me, that's kind of the overarching catch. So right now, it's vacant. Residential seems to make some sense. You're going to probably need, let's assume that the deed restriction is not there, but you're going to need the services probably of engineer, probably going to need a land surveyor, if not within the engineer's shop. You may need legal. That will go backwards and make sure everything is squared legally with regard to other kinds of deed restrictions, covenants, and those kinds of things. And so those would be the services certainly that the city would be looking at as well. I made the comment about, well, it flooded once. Is that site, let me ask a question, is that site then protected then with the dry run project and then the dam? Are those two then protecting? Have they sucked the floodplain back towards the river then, like it did north of Bramer Avenue?
The dry run, I believe, I'm not sure how much impact the dam has on it.
Okay,
We've got
okay.
documentation on that.
With it sitting there, I kind of figured they probably had moved that line. I know about 5, 6, 7 years ago, we did a housing rehab project. Rose in our office came up and did that program, and it was the first time we actually got to work closer to the river, so to speak, and so we were able to work north of Bramer and then work those neighborhoods that for the most part were disqualified from housing rehab because of that floodplain. I was just asking if it was a similar situation with this property, because the building that we are in, our office in downtown Waterloo, is levee protected. So I can probably just about throw a rock to the river from my office, but I'm on the backside of the levee. I'm considered levee protected. I'm in the 500-year floodplain. I would easily be in the 100-year floodplain, but I'm in the 500-year floodplain because of the wall. So that's the question I'm really asking. Obviously, then you're going to have the questions about servicing, water, sewer, all those kinds of things. The other question that I would add to that certainly would be, hopefully none of those affect the capacity of the existing services for the community. So if you add units, do we impact the sewer plant? If we add units, do we threaten anything with regard to a permit or anything like that? Those are the kinds of questions that certainly would be asked. Your policies, your land use documents, certainly. What's it zoned? What's the comprehensive land use plan say about it? Has their mitigation plans have anything to say about it? And then the regulations that go along with it. What do they entail? How do they impact? Do they impact? Maybe they don't. Maybe it's zoned just fine, would be allowable for, duplexes or whatever you're thinking. Again, that's another question. What uses are you thinking? What density? Are we thinking single family? Are we duplexing? Are we going up to quads? Are we gonna do something more dense than that? Again, what types of uses? If you're gonna stay in the driver's seat, right? Rather than letting a developer put together a plan. So uses certainly, the tools that I noted, the tools that are on the first 2 pages that would be in red, those tools might be out there as well too. So whether it's tax abatement, whether it's TIF, whether it's looking at regulations, whether it's doing that express permitting process, what other kinds of things can you make use of that were in the plan that can hopefully move the project along? Again, my same questions. Who's leading? What's the city's role? Who's the actual developer? Bring somebody in and do that? Do you let the property go to somebody else to develop it? Do you retain ownership? Do you subdivide it, or do you leave it in one lot? So obviously lots and lots of questions. And so these questions are really fit for around the table kind of discussion as you start to hammer this stuff out. So again, smaller.
If I could address some of that.
Yeah, please.
For my own personal thinking, is the housing study was very clear, we need affordable housing.
Yes.
And that's different than low-income housing. Affordable is your first-year teacher, your first-year nurse, first-year law enforcement. There isn't much property people like that can buy.
Right.
And that's a problem for us.
Or rent.
Or rent. And it's a problem for our employers. I was talking to one of our largest manufacturer in town. And to answer your question, he's saying 50 miles is the radius where his employees come from, right? So we really need some affordable housing. And the city owns a bunch of land. So this would seem like something we should really think over.
Sure.
In terms of utilities, remember that was an elementary school. It was fifth and sixth grade when we moved to town. I think it was early M's before that. Has it always been fifth and sixth?
Fifth and sixth. K through 4 elementary on one end, all the fifth graders for the whole community.
So
Plus,
with-
we had several hundred kids come over there at lunch hour and have lunch there, plus all the staff and students.
Yeah, so there were at least a couple of hundred kids in that building, so the sewer ought to be sufficient.
Should be, but, if I could just step in here a second, Brian, you're asking extremely valuable, important questions that need to have answers. But if you noticed the council up here, you're looking at deer caught in the headlights. I mean, this is not something that the seven of us, or at least speaking for myself, it will want to get down to the nitty-gritty on planning something like this.
Yep.
This is going to take some real elbow grease and some expertise in housing and zoning and building plans and permitting and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to bring up again something I brought up a couple of weeks ago when the housing study was first introduced. And I really believe that, and I like the term that you used about eating the elephant, because this is a huge thing. And when there's a big thing like this, what happens quite often is you look at it and say, oh my God, this is just too big a project, and we'll wait until next housing study 5 years down the road. And I
Kick the
would
can
hate-
down the road?
Yeah, I'd hate to do that. So,
Yeah.
but, my suggestion was, I'm gonna bring this up again, is I think we need some task force or city commission or something that comes up and answers those questions that you have. The wonderful job of picking these things out of the report, by the way. This is very, very clear. I love this. And, going through here and making the investigations and, making the plans and coming back to council and saying, this is what we would like to do we have your approval? So otherwise, I don't
Yep.
think this thing is gonna really get legs. I think there has to be a dedicated group who has the responsibility for moving projects like this forward. I'm just throwing this out here. What do you see other cities doing?
Same kind of thing. So I'll use Cedar Falls. And Cedar Falls and Waverly have similarities. College town, the price of housing is high, affordability is low. Have students that will gobble up what you have that
Yeah.
is affordable. And sometimes landlords are willing to stack the students like cordwood in the house. And so, same kinds of issues. They were the other community I was talking about when I said they're having to compete a little bit. They were used to, I think, people coming to them. Still are, but I think they're having to relook at their tools. They're having to relook at some things. Because certainly what they're attracting is great housing. But $500,000 home is really, really out of reach. And the starters aren't there. And so communities, and maybe that's the case here in Waverly, will look at the surrounding communities as being the source of their affordable housing, because they don't have affordable housing. And so it kind of gets pushed a little bit outward towards the other communities. And that's not really the desirability in terms of creating a well-rounded community. And so what we're seeing is that. We're seeing even the minutest little tool of rebating the building permit fees. and the hookup fee for electric or water or sewer, or those kinds of things that may not mean a lot to a city council that's got a multi-million-dollar budget, but it may mean a lot to me as a homeowner, because that also helps me get in the door. All right, so again, some communities have gone through the ringer. They've used TIF, they've used abatement, they've used that, now they're looking for the next thing, because people are gaining on them. Other communities, lots of communities have tax abatement. So your comments about a smaller group, James was down in our office at a meeting last week, and I said, you know, this might not be the right forum for the conversation. Might be great to start it off at this level, but we really need to break it down into a smaller group that can get around the table, and that's got a cross-section of the community that can start to work through some of these questions. But you as a council and elected officials need to get through really the big policy issues, like what's our role? Do we want to own this? Do we want to develop it? Are we going to be a landlord? Are we going to sell the units? Are we going to subdivide it and walk away? Are we going to give it to a developer? What's our role? You know, how do we incent this? And you work through then the financial pieces or the regulatory pieces. In Cedar Falls, we broke them into those pieces. We had some regulatory things. We actually sat down with developers, realtors, and said, what are we doing right? What are our challenges here? Why are we, you know, it's great that we're building these units, but why aren't we doing anything that's maybe more affordable? Well, we didn't necessarily have the tools. So one of the tools was the study. Well, what does the study do? It helps you get at those workforce housing tax credits as well too. So using that report as much as you can is really getting your money's worth. And so it was just little things like that. And they had some 3 dozen items, 2.5 dozen items that they had as well. Some very simple, some very complicated, some probably not going to happen. Some would happen if maybe the state helped us a little bit, like I had in there, the land banks. That's something, that bill is sitting there. That bill has been on and off for about 5 years. And that's an opportunity for a local nonprofit then to accept properties that may have been demolished, that were dilapidated, through a 657A process, where the city then takes that property back and then gives it to the nonprofit, who then works to get the housing back on the rolls again. So we may need a little bit of help, but I think for me it's all about, we need to get this down to a smaller group. But that doesn't mean as a council you don't need to be thinking about some of those questions that I ask, the big questions. What's your role? What's your role? What are you willing to do? What are you willing to pay for? What's too far? And so in terms of cost, in terms of procedure, or do you want to just say, okay, we're going to put the property up for sale, take the lowest bid, follow the Iowa code, and then turn it over and let somebody else do that, and really be more of a, this is our plan, this is our procedure, and we'll make sure it fits. Nothing wrong with that. Just another role.
I understand what you're saying. Surely the city council should not be in the weeds
Right.
on a development
Right.
project. And I would say that I am second to none in my appreciation of city commissions. But if we're going to get this done,
Yeah.
maybe there is a tool better, faster than a committee or a commission. It's not that we've kicked this can down the road. It's 20 years. The can is old, rusted, and dented, and mostly in the dirt. So if we're going to take the housing study seriously, we need to move forward.
In Cedar Falls case, they have a private nonprofit, Cedar Falls Economic Development Corp., that really took on the role with the plan and broke it into pieces. Obviously, you have to work with the city still, because a lot of the province or a lot of the power still goes with the city. But it was really given to that group, and they said, okay, you know the businesses, you know the industries, you know who the staff is down at City Hall, and could work through then the processes and procedures. And so they're the ones that got the study done. They're the ones, we've got a housing trust fund going, but they're looking at a number of other things as well too. They've got TIF for housing that they're doing as well, a new thing for them, Now, I shouldn't say new, they actually did that in the middle 1990s. So it's been a 30-year hiatus for them. But they're actually back to looking at using TIF for housing purposes. Again, trying to get some affordable housing going. And they're looking in certain areas of the community, probably been following a little bit on TV or in the newspaper, certainly. But again, they're looking at that set-aside money that I talked about. That money is going to go back into other programs then again, that TIF set-aside, those dollars that have to be set aside when they help a developer, if the developer doesn't build LMI housing, if they build market. And so if they build market, those dollars have to sit. And so they're going to figure out how to infuse those right back into the community, and what they'll probably do is they're going to put it right back into their housing trust fund as match potentially, is what they've talked about. Now, whether they do that in the end, but it is certainly a very easy solution for them in terms of using those dollars, because the trust fund has those same income limitations.
Well, I don't believe we've ever used residential TIF. I know that when Bill Worker was a city attorney, he was not particularly in favor of using
Sure.
residential TIF. I didn't really understand, and still don't, the ins and outs of doing that. I know that I've had some discussions, and the mayor and I talked once about doing a residential trust fund kind of thing. This very, just throwing out ideas. And of course, the big issue there was, okay, where do the funds come from? How do we fund this thing?
Yeah, seed
And
money.
that's kind of where we got stuck. So, you know, I think there are a lot of opportunities here, and I think a lot of this stuff are things that we have talked about kind of around the edges, but not really been able to grasp making plans.
Yeah,
And I'm still not exactly sure what we need to do to get off of, you know, to get off the starting line here. I mean, do we as a council, are we going to have to pass some kind of a resolution, have a discussion, or do something about how involved we want the city to be in these projects? Because I'm not even sure what the options are for us to be able to do that. Is this something that we want to have other people say, here are some things that we can do, what sounds like it's good, what are the things that you want to do as a council? I'm not sure how we get off the starting line.
for me, I think.
Well, I think we figure out who the key players are. I mean, I'm having a little bit of deja vu because we talked about this sort of thing when we talked about the Irving project.
Okay.
And so we ran into a few obstacles, like how do we identify a developer that might work with us? It's not necessarily a project that's going to earn a developer a lot of money, right?
Right.
But I think it's good for the community. It's potentially good marketing for that developer. And I think it's about bringing key players to a table. I don't know if you call it a commission or a task force, but it reminds me what we were trying to do with the new economic development strategy of sort of having impromptu target groups that we could go to and use. So developers, somebody obviously from planning and zoning needs to be involved.
Yep.
I do think it's important for somebody from the city council to be on this, not that to be in the
Liaison.
weeds, but I think to oversee this or to keep the focus to make sure we're doing something that fits with the city goals, that fits with the housing study, et cetera. So I think it's identifying private individuals as well as city staff like Connie Tolan, et cetera,
Yep.
to brainstorm and meet together and work on this. I don't think it's anything we can't accomplish. I think we should. I mean, we've identified we need housing. That's a choice piece of property. It's my understanding that with the Dry Run project, that opened up what could be done there. We ran into issues of NIMBY, right? Not here. We
Yep.
want housing, but not right here, and we don't want it to look a certain way, and is the sewer gonna back up? And we'd rather have green space, even though nobody uses it. And so you run into a lot of obstacles, and so it's
Yep.
all about how can you sell this? How can you sell this idea as good for the community? It helps bring commuters to our town, et cetera. And so I don't see it as insurmountable. I think it's just you sit down and you get some key players and you figure it out, and we figure out, okay, what are our legal obstacles? Are there deed restrictions? And then throw it out there. I mean, we were asking for, what about tiny houses? I had no idea that this prison program existed. And it's been in existence when we were having that discussion.
Sure.
Okay, and so, I mean, that's one source of potential housing. You know, are there other developers who would work with us? Or we talked about the architecture students at ISU. I mean, what are some other, you know, Hawkeye has a building program. We talked about Habitat for Humanity. You know, what are some other partnerships we could make? So I don't think it's insurmountable. I just think you need to sit down and work on it.
Make a
And we
list.
didn't do that last time. We didn't have, we had a lot of discussion about it, but we did not have any sort of hybrid group put together. And I think we now have, I think, the right players and the people to do that. So I don't think it's insurmountable at all.
I might have kind of lost track of the discussion here, because are we talking about the housing plan in its entirety, or are we talking specifically about the urban school
Both.
property?
Yes.
Both.
Okay, because I think the urban school property is one piece
Yep.
Yeah.
of the housing
Yeah.
plan.
Yep.
But I think it's what people are saying, right? Let's eat this one step at a time.
Yeah, and I
I see
understand.
the big picture, there's a lot of questions and, you know, maybe, you know, you want to have the commission and all this, but let's put that over to the side, let's do something.
Yeah.
And let's start small, let's start with a project right here and right
Yeah,
now.
it's like a pilot project. I mean,
Absolutely.
As
You know,
as
and-
the mayor says, it's low hanging fruit, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
And what the study offers, the project, is the fact that the study has given you quite a smorgasbord of things to look at and think about.
I mean, you really can't go wrong. I mean, the housing study basically says we need all sorts of housing,
Yep.
right? You know, and so, and we
Rental,
have, you
owner,
know, like
age.
Bartles is working on senior housing. I think that's pretty much covered, but what we need is affordable housing. And, you know, non-rental housing, at least if we're looking at this site. I think that's
Sure.
one thing we did talk about, was wanting the people who purchase those homes to
Purchase.
live in those homes. There's so much property in that area that's gone to rental. And it's a great location, convenient to downtown, convenient to the eventual new bridge, et cetera. So I don't think it's insurmountable at all, but I think you just bite off a little piece at a time, and this is a great site to start. And who knows, I mean, with this project, we might tweak the people who are involved and say, okay, we were missing somebody from this, with this expertise, and you
Yep.
just figure it out as you go.
Yep.
You
Why
know.
didn't we think to invite them from the beginning?
Yeah.
Would be my
Or maybe we
statement.
don't really need this certain, you know, type of expertise at the table.
Right.
Maybe we
Right.
needed them before this, but, or at later or whatever.
Sure.
So
No,
I think it's very doable.
I think for me, it's just a matter of trying to figure out the group, who is the group. And I know committees and commissions and boards can drive everybody crazy in terms of the time spent and the hours and those kinds of things. But if you lock it down to a handful of projects or a project, or starting with the plan and saying, you know, like a book club, right? Here's your 170-page book that you need to go read, but pay attention to the back end. The statistics are really cool for people like me that like the numbers, but if you want to see what they're telling you, you need to look at what you'll be challenged with over the next 5 to 10 years. Then the back part is giving you a pretty good roadmap. And they don't have everything listed in there. I added some of those things that are on the list. So no one person can know all of that. The other thing I would tell you about housing is if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not easy. It takes time. That's the other piece, is that it will take time. And so it's just really a matter of winding your way through it. And looking at what your policies are as a city council. That's another role for you, is do any of our policies hinder this? Do they help it? What can we do? Who do we need to have involved? But the liaison idea makes sense. A council member liaison, or the mayor, or planning and zoning commission member, or whomever it is. just having those right people there. I can probably give you a good start, and probably give you some on the paper there too, but certainly your staff is more than capable in terms of coming up with a list, just a cross-section.
No, I think this gives us a nice outline, right, of the questions. There's a specialist for each of those areas.
Yep.
Right, and city
Yep.
staff know who those people are, planning and zoning.
Yep.
And I'm not an anti-commission, anti-task force person. It depends on how you run the meeting,
Right.
right? And if you're
Correct.
efficient and goal-oriented and you're delegating to make sure, the right people are working to figure out the right information, that I mean, we read our city commission minutes. I don't feel like people are wasting time,
Good.
so I think it's quite doable.
I was talking to one of the smartest members of our community, and that person was saying that historically in our town and every town, planning and zoning and city council has been about making sure people are coloring within the lines. Right? That's what P and Z and council does. But with this housing shortage we have, maybe we need to start asking, where do people want to color? And how can we move the lines to make it work? That's the way I view this project. We desperately need some housing, the city owns some land. What is the most expedient way we can make something good happen?
I think we need to think outside the lines, personally, I mean, it's good, you want
I
to
love
follow the
lines. Come on,
rules.
what are you talking about?
And you want to, we do, we need to make sure that we have the proper land use, the zoning, et cetera, but I think you need to think outside the box.
Yeah, I was never a master at statistics, but if you've got 27 things there, how many different alternatives and options of putting those together do you have, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of looking at those things and figuring out what's right for the community.
You're going to get an answer from Brian now.
I was going to say, Dr. Bergen will.
Brian can help me
do
there.
Well, I have to say, I'm stuck on the idea of these, in the study you see, we have about 1,000 people who live outside of Waverly more than 50 miles and work in Waverly. And if you're driving 100 miles every day, 50 miles each way to go to work, there's a lot of gas money that you could put towards a good mortgage. So the idea that all we need is affordable housing, I think there's something else that those people are driving 50 miles a day for. I mean, what do they feel like they're getting in their hometown that they're not getting in Waverly? So while I agree that yes, we need affordable housing, I think that some of the reason those people are driving all that distance is not just because they can't find a house in their price range.
Sure. I
So-
mean, they're part of a system, right? And so not everybody's family wants to pick up and move to Waverly.
Oh, absolutely,
Right, and
absolutely.
so,
Right.
but I think, I don't know that we need to, overanalyze that, right? We know, I mean, I work with plenty of people at the hospital who drive because they want to work at Waverly Health Center, right? Or for whatever, but they might not want to live here. And that's okay, not everybody needs to live here, but.
Well, and I think that when you're talking about, I mean, there are a lot of people who happily live in Cedar Falls and work in Waverly. And because there's something about Cedar Falls that they prefer. They don't want to live in as small a town as Waverly. But I think that once you're talking about 50 miles a day, that's a lot of gas money. And that's a lot of time behind the wheel. And I think those are people we could definitely find a home for in Waverly if we could figure out what it was that made the difference. And yeah, there are some people where, they're driving 50 miles to Waverly because their spouse is driving 50 miles to Iowa City.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
All good points, all questions that can be asked, in terms of why is there a reason? Is it a quality of life thing? Is the kids don't want to jump out of school, we don't want to move the kids because they're in high school, or whatever it is. There's probably a reason, I would agree, why they're not going to do that, or moving's a headache.
Yeah, but there are also jobs in town that don't pay a lot.
Right.
Some at the hospital, certainly over at Bartles, some of the manufacturing. They may just not have the cash to purchase a house.
Sure.
A lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So I sort of feel like we ought to set ourselves a deadline, like to, get a group together or start brainstorming who we want and set a deadline as to when we're gonna do that. Or else I feel like I don't think it's kicking the can, but you get distracted, there's other items of business and, but I don't know, I'd like to see us figure it out maybe, and the budget's happening and within 90 days or something like that, to try to get a group together to sit and, I would leave it up somewhat to city staff to figure out who are the players, Connie and somebody from P and Z and James and, to think about who should be at the table.
Well, I think we want to try and answer everything we can first, and come back to you with what we can't answer.
Yeah,
At least
right.
give you more documentation. Is this possible? Is it not? What's it look like? It's currently zoned commercial. Well, what should it be zoned? What are you open to having it zoned to? Are you willing to go R1 all the way to R4, or is something in there you won't do? Because that's the problem we got into last time. We
Right.
didn't want to rezone it necessarily. We wouldn't commit to rezoning it. Well, then no developer's going to come if you're not going to commit to rezoning it.
Sure.
It's a chicken and egg thing. You just can't sit and hope.
Yep,
You have to make decisions of what you're willing to have. Will you do townhomes? Will you do a certain amount of density? Will you only do single-family homes? All this we have talked to death, but no decisions are made. So we can't move forward. We're paralyzed until you make a decision, what you will and won't allow to start with, because that kicks off any interest from anyone else in actually doing it. If they don't know what you're gonna do, they're not gonna put the time and energy into creating something you're just gonna turn down.
well, so when would be a realistic timeframe for you
I'd
guys to bring us
say-
those answers?
I'd say 30, 45 days, we'll have everything we know that we can get. We just gotta pull files, older files, some of the stuff goes all the way back 2008. I'd like to talk to P and Z, some of the members, what do they know, how's this gone? You get a lot of experience sitting there, and I think it's good to pull that together, even if it's a meeting after the regular meeting or something, just to get some discussion on what this is. That's why we have this group. They've got time, got knowledge, we need to utilize that. So I would say, next time they're meeting, we need to have that kind of a discussion. What do we know? But we have to go back in and get in the attorney's records and see what we've already been down this
Right,
road.
Right,
I would hate to think, I'm not gonna say I'm for certain, that we would go through all this trouble without checking first that we could.
Yes.
totally.
Good idea.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
gonna say that couldn't have happened, but let's hope that didn't happen, and we actually can go forward with the questions that were answered, or
Yeah.
asked, I should say, by Brian.
Yep.
Could I ask, is there a role within what we're talking about doing? Is there a role for Intercog to be part of that? And clearly, you've got an incredible amount of expertise and experience and all those things that could be a great resource for us. Is that something that you do?
Yeah, really, another question for you. I'll answer your question with a question. What role do you see for us? Do you want us to lead meetings? Do you want us to do that? Do you want us to participate in the meetings? Do you want us just to be a resource? That you have your meetings, somebody gets a hold of us after each meeting, James, whoever, says, these are the things we've discussed. Have you heard about is this possible? Have you seen this before? What's a resource? What's a source? We feed it back. So it could be being here. It could be being down there. It really comes down to what degree do you want us to help you?
I would say you're a resource until you need to be more, if you're capable of being more, depending on where route you go.
Sure.
I think especially to know what other cities are doing,
Yep.
what are funding options, what hasn't worked, right? Yeah, I don't know that necessarily to run the meetings, but certainly to
Right.
give your expertise and to give us that perspective,
Yep.
what you're seeing in our region.
Just out of curiosity, Brian, how many of those prison-built homes could you put on the Irving land?
There's one in
Well,
Greener County someplace on their map. I looked at the website.
There is.
Where is
It's
it?
out by the old Air Force Base.
Oh, is it in that
Yeah.
neighborhood?
It's out in that
Yep.
neighborhood.
yep. There's once a Habitat
Oh,
owns
is-
it. We use the trust fund dollars to put the basement underneath it.
Right.
I was gonna
And
say,
then
do
the-
they don't have basements.
And then living in Iowa is one of the conversations of, we really need to have a safe
Yeah.
room or a
Yeah.
basement.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's the closest one. We have another one, Grundy Center, working on a couple more in a couple of other communities as well. And they're gonna, where these things have grown up, have been individual units sprinkled in the community where there's a vacant lot, sometimes owned by the city, that's serviced, easy turnaround like that, low-hanging fruit. Or there's been a larger parcel of ground that was subdivided and it became a neighborhood where there were a number of them, 8, 10 units that then went into that particular subdivision. And that's being worked on, I think, down in Vinton right now. So, and I could reach out to the person who's managing that.
So would you say maybe 10?
Probably, again, with setbacks and things like that, yard requirements.
If you want a garage or something like that, accessory to it, that's gonna be a lot.
Yeah,
10
yeah,
would be a lot.
yeah, driveway.
1,000 to 1,200
Yep.
square feet, it looks like.
You might be looking at about half that.
I just
The
love the price of
triangle's,
90,000.
the triangle's only 1.67 acres.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I don't know what the minimum
So if you do
requirements
a quarter
are.
acre lot, if it works, it's only 6.
right,
I mean, that's tight.
right.
Right.
Plus roads and everything else, I think you're
Sure.
looking probably 4 to 6, best case.
But we were also talking about looking at setback requirements of lot sizes. And
Mm-hmm.
if we had to make adjustments to those to make a project work,
Yeah.
that we would need to make those adjustments. And everybody can't live on a half acre lot.
Sure.
You know, these are not gonna be half acre lot houses.
Right.
Yeah. And some of these things, and again, that's a long list that they've given you. Some of, you might just have to look at it in chronological order rather than consecutive, or, I'm sorry, concurrent. And so you're gonna have to pick off and say, if we would have really relaxed our zoning requirements, or if we would have zoned that a little bit differently, we could have had a little more density and done a few more units kind of thing. So sometimes you can work that within your existing ordinance. Just depends on what the lot requirements and setbacks are in the current ordinance. Doesn't mean you have to create a whole new district or anything. Sometimes it's just a matter of moving the boundaries, moving the zoning boundaries, so that you can allow for smaller lots. That's what a number of communities do in the older parts of town where they have variance issues and setback problems, is they will downzone then that area so that the setbacks aren't nearly as severe.
Well, I think the division up by the old Cary School, some of the lots to the south were smaller.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of those have sold. The larger lots have sold, but there's a variety of sizes within that subdivision, but.
Well, if you want to go on a tour down to Newton, if you let us know, we'll set it up. Because we've had mayors, council members,
Yeah.
bankers go down, walk through the units, meet the folks working on the units, walk through the classrooms. They're more than happy to do that for you.
I think that'd be good. They have finished examples, like the interior's finished and,
When I was there, they had them kind of almost in 5 steps. One to go down the road and one that had just been framed.
okay.
So you could see it at the various stages when sheetrocking was going on to, we're getting ready to hook the trailer up to it kind of thing. So, again, they're more than willing to do that if you're interested in going down. Again, it's interesting to watch how the process works, but each unit takes about 5 months, 4 or 5 months probably to do. And they're trying to do about 40 this year is what they're gonna shoot for in the next calendar year. So they've kind of ramped up, started small and are getting bigger and now they're talking about a building to put stuff in and just obviously with COVID and building costs and building materials costs has been really a challenge. Those units started, I think the first year they were selling them around 70 or 75,000 and now they're in the middle 90s. So just with increase in materials.
Well, I think that, with 90,000 for a house, but you have to do, foundation and that stuff, but you still,
Yep.
you could put up 6 new houses under 200,000 apiece. That would be a very nice test. Yeah, then we could talk about more infill on other properties we have, or other people own.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, and that particular program is also income banded, but it's not like a percentage of area median income or county median
Looks
like you're
it's
used to.
125,000, yeah.
Yep, 125,000 for a household. So that's pretty high. I was just
Yeah.
looking at the Bramer County numbers and 80% of AMI right now in Bramer County is in the 50s. So that's a pretty generous number in terms of income. So they're trying hard to still have an income requirement, but not make it so onerous. And those kinds of things, they've thought through so many things with that program over the 5 years that they've been doing this, that people aren't gonna be flipping them. And so there's a 5-year basically forgivable loan kind of thing that gets attached to it. And so, again, you're not gonna flip them and you're not gonna do those kinds of things, but they want people to get into them. And they were working through some of the rental things as well too, or buying on contract, and some other things that they knew are hurdles. And again, they're doing kind of what you're talking about. They didn't get it all resolved the first house went off the lot. They're correcting as they go. Their board is flexible enough that they've just been changing it, and they're a nonprofit organization that, again, that board has a lot of say. And again, the board is primarily technical people too, so.
You'd think the state would fund it because it's going to save them money in the prison system, because their
Already
recidivism
have.
rate is very low, so.
Yeah, already
you'd think
have.
that they would,
Yep, governor's
I
been
wouldn't
there a
mind my
number,
tax
yep,
dollars
governor's
going to
been there a
that.
number of times, and there have been dollars that have gone that direction as well. When they first started, they had to pay a moving company to move the house. And it's fascinating to watch them move a house, moving the lines, moving the power lines, moving the trees out of the way, and picking the route, and then making sure they can get the trailer onto the property and get the house off onto the foundation. And now they've got their own trailer, they've got their own semi, they've got all of those kinds of things. So the state has helped with some of those dollars, certainly. So it gives them a lot of their buying power. And the cabinets and some of those things are Iowa Prison Industry cabinets, so they're high-quality cabinets as well, too, so.
So what I hear from you, council, correct me if I'm wrong, please, I hear that there is a consensus to move forward on the Washington Irving property, to have city staff do the research they need to do, and then talk about pulling people together for a cup of coffee and making this go. Is that right?
Yep.
That was a cup of coffee, not a commission.
Big cup of coffee.
Yeah.
All right,
All right.
I'll sit down. I thank you for your time.
No, Brian, we thank you.
Yes.
Very much.
Very helpful.
It's very, very helpful.
You're welcome. Again, for whatever you need us, James, resource, bounce stuff off, community examples, by all means.
3D modeling.
3D
Wanna start with
modeling,
that?
3D building.
Yep.
That's actually in your book, by the way. It's
Yeah,
one
I
of
saw
those innovative solutions that's in their list is 3D building, and that's, Iowa State's doing some of that, so in the architecture school.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
City Council, you have item G. In front of you are 3 minutes from the Golf Course Commission. Any questions or discussion on that? Okay. That takes us to item H, staff updates. We've only got 2 city employees here, so
We have none tonight, sir.
none tonight. And that then would take us to council people's updates, city council comments. Councilperson Bergen.
I'll be at the Wooden Foot after the meeting, anyone who wants to discuss city council business over beer.
Thank you. Councilperson Jones.
I was not here last week, but I would like to give a shout out to Paul Chabelle for the awarding
Yes.
earned through the Iowa Urban Tree Council. I know he takes his job very seriously.
Yes. Councilperson Myers.
Nothing for me.
Councilperson Kangas.
Just kind of a note that we are now hitting spring athletic season for college certainly, but high school and middle school level, so you can have kids out running. Coming here tonight, I came out and came around on the Parkway, and there's soccer practice starting, soccer fields complex. So be aware, people that are traveling along there. Baseball will be starting, softball, I'm sure, they'll be starting to get out on the fields as well. So just heads up, there's gonna be activity as the weather warms up and people are getting outside more.
Excellent. Councilperson Drago.
Yeah, well, I would just like to second what Brent said. about Paul Cheville's award. It's a big deal. Statewide award, it's a fantastic thing, very well deserved. I think it just goes to show the quality of city staff that we have here in Waverly. Really put them up against anybody in the state. I think we've got great city staff, and we've got great people here. So congratulations again, Paul.
Thank you. Councilperson Ruthie.
Nothing from me.
Councilperson Wolf.
Nothing for me.
Well, this is your last meeting, your last chance to get to say something. Guest councilperson, what's on your mind, Mr. Root?
I really have nothing. Learned a lot with the housing thing here tonight, so. Yeah, I really, yeah. The only, well, with the housing thing, I know, talking to my sister and other friends, the other thing that is starting to be a big thing is these tiny home communities. Because I know my sister, she loved finding it. She says, hopefully Waverly comes up with one, she'd move up here in a heartbeat. Just, small, tiny homes with a nice, so you don't want a lot of yard, don't want a big house, just,
Right.
I think there's a lot of opportunity maybe in town for something like that.
Yeah.
There was a real fine article in the most recent issue of AARP magazine. Yes, I read the AARP. On legislation proposed in Des Moines that would allow for more tiny homes. In that, if you had a big enough lot, obviously, not any lot, but one that's big enough, you could put a tiny home on your lot, and that's where your mother or father could live. So they can age in place on your property near the grandkids, but still have their own space. And I thought that was a really intriguing idea. There are not that many lots that would accommodate that, but there are some. So maybe we should be more open to that kind of stuff. Thank you, Mr. Root. Mayor's comments. Tomorrow night over at the high school, they're doing something really great. It's, I don't know, I put it in my calendar as trades night. I'm not sure what the real name is. But there'll be local employers, like the hospital and the nursing home and the manufacturers and stuff, trying to recruit students into jobs in the trades and service. So I think that's a really intriguing thing. I commend the school district for that, helping to get kids started on a nice path and to keep them in town. That's all I have. I would be open to a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second, any discussion? This is a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, this meeting is adjourned.